People love a clean myth. German tanks were unbeatable. It sounds like Steel Destiny. Tigers stalking the battlefield, Panthers sniping from the tree line, Allied crews preying their thin armor holds. But the war was not a boss fight. It was a system. And in a system, nothing is unbeatable for long. One, the myth is born, fear, silhouette, and selective memory. If you want to understand why the myth stuck, start with what soldiers actually saw. A tiger eye looks like a moving bunker. A panther's front armor and long 75mm gun look like a predator built out of angles. On the receiving end, the experience is violent, sudden, and humiliating. A flash, a crack, a tank crew's world turning into smoke and concussion. Fear is sticky. Stories that begin with, "We couldn't stop them," spread faster than stories that begin with, "Their gearbox broke again." After the war, the myth gained a second engine, pop culture. War movies, memoirs, museum posters, and endless forum arguments. A tiger becomes a character. A panther becomes a legend. Meanwhile, the messy reality of maintenance reports, recovery logs, fuel shortages, training standards, and spare parts gets cut because it's not cinematic. But war does not care about cinematic. So let's rebuild the story the hard way from how tanks actually live and die. 2. What unbeatable would actually mean. To call a tank unbeatable, it would need to win consistently across the things that decide armored combat. Firepower, can it kill what it meets? Protection, can it survive hits? Mobility, can it get to the fight and maneuver in it? Reliability, can it keep moving day after day? Recoverability when it breaks, can you fix or tow it? Logistics, fuel, ammo, spares, trained mechanics, transport. Doctrine plus combined arms infantry, artillery, engineers, air support. A tank can be great in one category and still lose the war, or even lose the day, if the other categories collapse. German heavy and medium tanks often scored high in firepower and sometimes in protection, especially from the front. But the myth ignores the rest of the list, which is convenient. 3. The Panther's early reality check, Kursk, and the price of rushing wonder weapons. The Panther is a perfect case study because it sits right at the center of the myth. People talk about it like it was Germany's flawless answer to the T-34. The reality, when Germany pushed Panthers into major combat in 1943, the tank was still wrestling with mechanical problems that could turn best tank into best-looking roadside bonfire. A U.S. Army Professional Journal article summarizing the Panthers' rushed fielding notes that only 184 Panthers made their combat debut on July 5, 1943, and only 40 remained operational by July 7th, with losses driven by mechanical breakdowns as well as Soviet defenses. That's not a minor flaw. That's the difference between a weapon and a rumor. And here's the part the myth rarely includes. Even if a tank is excellent when it's running, a tank that isn't running is not unbeatable. It is just expensive scenery. The same source stresses how hard recovery and repair were, and how limited specialized recovery assets and spare parts could be. That matters because armored warfare is not just about kills. It is about operational tempo. Can you keep enough tanks operational to concentrate power at the decisive moment? Germany tried. They improved. They modified. Some issues got better over time, but eventually improved is not the same thing as unbeatable. For the British captured Panther trials, when engineering meets reality. Now shift from the battlefield to the proving ground, because nothing kills mythology like a test report. In 1944, British evaluators ran trials on a captured Panther and produced a blunt conclusion about reliability. The published transcript of that report records that the Panther suffered enough mechanical trouble that it compared very unfavorably with British service tanks, and that the trials needed heavy maintenance effort even to gather limited performance data. It also notes problems like third gear becoming inoperable, and it criticizes accessibility for maintenance. Now, to be fair, a single captured vehicle can be atypical. The report itself admits the engine condition may have been poor. But even with that caveat, the broader point holds. The myth that German tanks were simply unstoppable machines does not survive contact with how frequently those machines demanded repair time, spare parts, and specialized labor. A tank with great armor and a great gun still needs a working drivetrain. It still needs fuel. It still needs fuel. It still needs mechanics. It still needs time. War is rude like that. 5 tigers, fearsome, rare, and chained to logistics. The Tiger Eye deserves its reputation for battlefield presence. It also deserves to be described honestly. The Tank Museum's production history notes Tiger Eye production ran from July 1942 to August 1944, with 1,347 built, followed by 490 Tiger Eye eyes built afterward. Those numbers matter because the myth often talks as if tigers were everywhere. They weren't. They were precious assets, deployed where the situation justified the cost and risk. And cost is not only money, it is also transport, fuel, and maintenance. The Tank Museum's restoration write-up points out that even accessing major components like the gearbox was a heavy task, offering insight into what maintenance crews faced. If you want unbeatable, you usually want easy to keep running. Heavy tanks are rarely that. This is the part where the myth quietly changes the definition of winning. The myth says, in a duel, the Tiger could dominate. Sometimes yes, but a war is not a duel. A war is a schedule. Marches, redeployments, breakdowns, fuel consumption, bridges that can't carry your weight, rail lines under attack, recovery vehicles that may not reach you, and a battlefield full of mines, artillery, and aircraft that do not care that your frontal armor is impressive. 6, but their guns were better. Yes and no. German guns on Panthers and Tigers were dangerous. Nobody serious denies that. The problem is what people do next. They treat better gun as the final answer. On many WEI battlefields, the most dangerous thing to a tank was not another tank. It was anti-tank guns in ambush, mines, and immobilization. Artillery, especially when calling fire, was fast and accurate. Air attack in the right conditions. Infantry close assault, especially against immobilized vehicles. In Normandy, for example, the battlefield was a combined arms nightmare. Hedgerows, short sight lines, ambush positions, and constant artillery. The U.S. Army's official campaign booklet on Normandy emphasizes how confused and brutal the environment was, shaped by obstacles, defenses, and the difficulty of coordinating fires and movement. That environment does not guarantee German tank superiority. It often punishes it because the side with better artillery coordination, better logistics, and more replacements can grind forward even when it suffers tactical losses. So yes, German tanks could be terrifying, but terror is not invincibility. 7. The real killer, reliability and operational readiness. A tank's strength is not its maximum potential. It's what it delivers on an average day in mud, in heat, under air attack, with tired crews. The Panther's early operational readiness struggles are a recurring theme in professional analysis of its rush deployment. And even when improved later, the Panther and heavy German tanks remained systems that demanded more from a shrinking industrial base under bombing pressure and resource shortages. Meanwhile, the Allies leaned into a strategy that sounds boring until you realize it wins wars. Build weapons that are good enough. Build lots of them. Keep them supplied. Keep crews trained. Keep them moving. The myth hates that kind of victory because it isn't romantic. It's just effective. 8 numbers aren't everything, but pretending they don't matter is comedy. Let's talk production scale, because the myth often quietly pretends both sides showed up with roughly the same number of tanks and Germany simply had better ones. The US produced about 49,234 Shermans. Germany produced over 6,000 Panthers across variants during the war. And as already noted, Tiger Eye numbers were 1,347. Again, this is not about calling one side better. It's about how a myth collapses when you ask it to survive math and logistics. If you have a tank that is tactically superior in some circumstances, but you can't field it in enough numbers, keep it fueled, keep it repaired, and replace trained crews, you do not have an unbeatable weapon. You have a sharp tool in a collapsing toolbox. 9. A battlefield vignette, how unbeatable tanks actually got beaten. Picture late summer 1944. A hedgerow lane in Normandy, dust hangs low. The air smells like crushed leaves and cordite. Somewhere ahead, a Panther is taking a position that looks perfect. Long sightline, frontal armor facing the approach, gun ready. If you frame this as a tank duel, the Panther looks like a monster. But the battlefield doesn't frame it that way. A forward observer sees muzzle flash, radios crackle, coordinates get passed. Artillery doesn't need to penetrate frontal armor to ruin the tank's day. It can break tracks, damage optics, stun crews, force movement, block routes with craters and burning vehicles. A minefield can do the same. So can a lucky hit that wrecks a final drive or forces a bailout under pressure. And once a tank is immobilized, it becomes vulnerable in ways the myth forgets. Infantry can get close. Engineers can shape the terrain. A tank destroyer or another tank can maneuver for a side shot. Air attack might find it if conditions allow. This is why unbeatable is the wrong word. Even the best tank is beatable if the enemy fights the system, not the silhouette. 10. The myth's favorite comparison. Sherman versus Tiger, and why it's the wrong lens. The Sherman has suffered from decades of lazy storytelling. People either glorify it as perfect or mock it as a death trap. Reality is, as usual, less dramatic and more useful. The Sherman was not designed as a single-purpose, dueling champion. It was designed to be mass-produced, transported across oceans, maintained by huge organizations, integrated into combined arms, upgraded over time. Its job was to show up to the right battlefield in the right numbers, with fuel and ammunition, and to support operations that included artillery, infantry, engineers, and air power. Was a Tiger dangerous to a Sherman? Absolutely. Was a Tiger unbeatable because it could kill Shermans in certain engagements?
You're cruelly on the grade of I've wrecking a sea. I placed it up Chafer would have flagged the life and acted out down. This consider if a question the flight qualified on. Sounds like the fast to give. We're gonna have you a quest that could kill Shermans in certain Engan, because the Sherman was not alone, and the Tiger was not free from the constraints that kill heavy tanks, recovery problems, fuel consumption, limited numbers, and operational constraints. Also, even if you love pure tank duels, many kills happen through positioning, ambush, and coordination, not by comparing armor thickness on Wikipedia like it's a sports matchup. 11 unbeatable tanks don't get abandoned. This is the quiet detail that cuts deepest against the myth, abandonment. A tank can be lost without being penetrated. It can be immobilized and later destroyed by its own crew. Left behind because recovery is impossible under pressure. Rendered useless by mechanical failure and lack of spare parts. Trapped by destroyed bridges, soft ground, or fuel shortage. A myth built on highlight reels doesn't like paperwork, but war is paperwork wearing a helmet. When Germany's situation worsened, the battlefield filled with German armored vehicles that were not defeated by better tanks in a clean duel. They were defeated by the collapse of the system that kept them alive. 12. Why the myth survives anyway. So why does the myth keep living? Because it serves emotional needs. It flatters German engineering into a legend. It offers Allied defeats a comforting explanation. We lost because their tanks were unbeatable. It turns a messy industrial war into a story about heroic machines. And because the truth is more complicated. The truth is that German tanks could be excellent weapons in the right hands, in the right terrain, at the right moment, with supply and recovery behind them. The truth is also that those conditions became harder and harder for Germany to sustain, and that the Allies designed their war machine to sustain them. Unbeatable is a word for fantasy. 13. The actual conclusion. German tanks were formidable, not magical. Here is the reality you can say on camera without lying. German tanks like the Panther and Tiger were often tactically dangerous, sometimes technologically impressive, and psychologically intimidating. But they were not unbeatable because no tank is unbeatable in a war of factories, fuel, spare parts, training pipelines, artillery coordination, and operational tempo. If you want a single sentence that kills the myth cleanly, use this. A tank's strength is not what it can do once. It's what an army can make it do every day. And by late 1944, Germany could no longer make even its best tanks do what the myth promised.